It was the year 1869, and in the bustling, grimy chaos of New York City, a single, audacious vision consumed the mind of one man. Forget the Statue of Liberty, forget the Empire State Building. Before them all, there was a challenge so daunting, so lethal, and so fundamentally impossible that it defined the very audacity of the American spirit: to join the two great rival cities of Manhattan and Brooklyn across the unforgiving currents of the East River. For decades, the idea had been a fantasy, a punchline for cynics, and a death wish for engineers. The river itself was a nightmare. It wasn't a river at all, but a tidal strait, a churning artery of the Atlantic, crowded with masts of the world's busiest shipping lanes and choked with ice flows in winter. The depth of the bedrock was unknown, and the pressure of the current was crushing. But the most terrifying obstacle was invisible: the caisson's disease, a mysterious affliction that had already begun to claim its victims. The architect of this impossible dream was John Augustus Roebling, a brilliant Prussian immigrant and a master of the relatively new technology of wire cable suspension. Roebling didn't just design bridges, he saw them as functional works of art, monuments to human will. He had meticulously planned every detail of the greatest bridge the world had ever conceived, a structure that would stretch over 6,000 feet, held aloft by 4 colossal steel cables, anchored to granite towers taller than any building in New York. The scale was unprecedented, the cost astronomical, estimated at $15 million, a mind-boggling sum for the era. But before the first stone could be laid, fate intervened with a cruelty that seemed predetermined. In July 1869, Roebling was on a wharf taking final compass readings. A ferry suddenly surged into the dock, crushing his foot against a piling. The injury, initially a nuisance, quickly turned to tragedy. Tetanus set in. Just weeks later, the visionary who had engineered bridges strong enough to defy nature's fury was dead, felled by a minuscule bacterium. The nation mourned, the financiers panicked, and the cynics rejoiced. The Brooklyn Bridge Project, the 8th wonder of the world, was dead before it began. Or so they thought. Standing silently in the shadow of his father's coffin was Washington Augustus Roebling. Educated, sharp, and having served with distinction as a bridge engineer in the Union Army during the Civil War, Washington was his father's chosen successor. He was 32 years old, inheriting not a project, but a monumental, terrifying curse. The world knew John Roebling. The world was about to meet the man who would truly build his dream and pay a crippling price for it. The unseen enemy descending into the caisson. Washington Roebling's first, most critical task was sinking the massive foundations. His father had planned to use revolutionary structures called caissons. A caisson was an immense, inverted timber box, essentially a massive airtight bell sunk to the river floor. The workers, the sandhogs, would enter through an airlock, and compressed air would be pumped into the chamber to keep the river water out. Then they would manually dig through the silt, mud, and boulders until the caisson reached the solid bedrock necessary to support the colossal granite towers above. In 1870, the Brooklyn caisson, larger than a football field and built from southern pine, was towed into position. Washington Roebling, refusing to simply delegate, was often the first man down the airlock. He was a hands-on engineer, driven by the legacy of his father and the sheer complexity of the task. The environment inside the caisson was truly hellish. The air was thick and murky, lit only by flickering gaslights. The temperature often soared well over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The constant, deafening roar of the compressed air pumping into the chamber was maddening. Sandhogs, often immigrants desperate for the high wages, shoveled and blasted their way through prehistoric glacial deposits. But the real peril was the pressure.
At depths nearing 80 feet, the pressure within the caisson was nearly 4 times the normal atmospheric pressure. When the men ascended too quickly, the nitrogen in their blood dissolved into gas bubbles, attacking their central nervous systems. This was the caisson's disease, the bends. Washington documented the symptoms meticulously: crippling joint pain, paralysis, agonizing internal cramps, and terrifying disorientation. It was a new disease, known only to bridge builders and divers. While he pushed his men, Roebling also experimented relentlessly, designing better airlocks and advising slower decompression. He demanded absolute fidelity to the schedule and absolute immersion in the project, often spending entire shifts supervising the most dangerous sections himself. This relentless dedication was heroic, but ultimately disastrous. In the early months of 1872, after repeated descents, Washington emerged from the caisson for the last time. The pain began in his joints, then spread to his spine, culminating in a violent, paralyzing seizure. The pressure had done its work. The great engineer who had inherited the greatest engineering project in America was now crippled, unable to walk, barely able to speak, and suffering from acute sensory impairment. He was confined to a darkened room, a prisoner in his own body, unable to be physically present at the site that defined his life. The project had claimed its second Roebling. The world, once again, prepared for the final failure. The year was 1872. The Brooklyn Bridge Project, the costliest and most complex infrastructure effort in U.S. history, was in utter chaos. The chief engineer was a bedridden invalid. The supervising engineers, overwhelmed by the bends and the sheer scale of the operation, were arguing among themselves. Investors were threatening to pull their money. But where Washington Roebling's life had been shattered, a new force emerged: his wife, Emily Warren Roebling. Emily was a product of a privileged New York family, but possessed a sharp intellect and a formidable will. She had married Washington just before the Civil War and had followed him through his campaigns, even witnessing the Battle of Gettysburg. She was not a trained engineer, but she was deeply devoted to her husband and to his legacy. Confined to his darkened room in their Brooklyn Heights brownstone, Washington's mind remained as sharp as ever. His only link to the colossal construction site, located a short, agonizing distance away, was his wife. The situation demanded not just a nurse, but an intermediary, a student, and a commander. Emily stepped into this role with an astonishing resolve that astonished everyone, including the hardened supervisors on the site. Her training began simply, relaying Washington's written instructions to the foreman. But as the project grew, so did her expertise. She spent hours meticulously studying advanced mathematics, the properties of materials like steel and granite, catenary curves and the distribution of forces in suspension gridges, the chemical composition and testing of the new high-tensile Bessemer steel that would be used in the cables, and the intricate calculations for winding the 14,000 miles of wire that would form the 4 main cables. Soon, Emily was doing more than just relaying messages. She began to interpret the calculations, clarify the plans, and even resolve on-site engineering disputes. When supervisors challenged her authority, she would quietly but firmly produce the exact, precise calculation that proved her point, shocking them into submission. She became, in all but title, the chief engineer of the Brooklyn Bridge. The Great Cable Scandal. The most critical phase of the project was spinning the 4 main suspension cables. This was John Roebling's genius and the entire reason the bridge could exist. Washington, watching from his window high above the construction, had put his faith in a contractor named J. Lloyd Hay, the lowest bidder. But as the wire spinning began in 1877, Emily, observing the process with an engineer's eye, grew suspicious. She demanded that the wires be tested. Initial tests showed a startling, dangerous weakness. The contractor, Hay, was secretly substituting high-quality, pre-tested wire with cheaper, inferior iron wire that was then dipped in acid to make it look superficially uniform. Hay was attempting to build the most iconic structure in America with criminally substandard materials, risking the lives of every future pedestrian. The scandal was a political powder keg. Hay had powerful connections. The Bridge Committee wanted a quick cover-up to protect their investment. Emily and Washington, however, refused to compromise. Emily, leveraging her newfound influence and political acumen, forced a full public investigation. She presented the damning evidence, meticulously documented by Washington and herself, to the bridge trustees. The resulting uproar was national news. Hay was fired and disgraced. All the bad wire, thousands of feet, was condemned and replaced. This scandal, managed and ultimately solved by Emily, cemented her authority and saved the structural integrity of the bridge. It was the moment the Roebling family, now effectively a one-woman command unit, proved that their commitment to quality surpassed all political and financial pressures.
As the 1870s gave way to the 1880s, the twin granite towers of the Brooklyn Bridge began to pierce the New York skyline. They were monumental feats of Romanesque engineering, standing nearly 277 feet tall. For perspective, the towers were, for a time, the tallest structures in the Western Hemisphere. The construction of the towers was a spectacle. Massive stones, quarried in Maine, were delivered by boat and hoisted by steam-powered derricks. The sound of hammers, the hiss of steam, and the cries of the riggers echoed across the river. By 1883, the cables were complete. Woven from 14,000 miles of steel wire, each cable was 15 inches thick and possessed a tensile strength that could hold over 12,000 tons. The deck was being laid, the sight of the steel lattice stretching across the terrifying void, slowly connecting the two great cities, captivated the nation. Washington Roebling, still physically broken and watching through binoculars from his window, directed the final precise adjustments. Every measurement, every alignment, every stress test was communicated through Emily. The bridge was not just a means of transport, it was a psychological turning point for America. It was the first structure to utilize steel, the material of the future, rather than iron in its load-bearing cables. It represented the moment America transitioned from a country of local markets to an industrial powerhouse of interconnected megacities. The dark cost of progress. The bridge was a triumph, but the cost in human lives was staggering. By the time of its completion, the Brooklyn Bridge had claimed the lives of over 20 workers, some estimates are higher, not including the unknown number of sandhogs who died from complications of the bends years later. The first victim was John Roebling himself. Several workers fell from the dizzying heights of the towers. Others were crushed by falling machinery. But the most pervasive tragedy remained the bends, which had paralyzed Washington and killed many of the men who worked under him. The bridge was, in effect, built on a foundation of sacrifice, a testament to the perilous nature of 19th-century heavy engineering. On May 24, 1883, the bridge was finally inaugurated. 250,000 people celebrated in the streets of New York and Brooklyn. President Chester Arthur led the procession, followed by the governor of New York, Grover Cleveland, and other dignitaries. Cannons fired salutes. Ships in the harbor blasted their whistles. The president and the governor walked across the newly opened span from the Manhattan side to the Brooklyn side. But the most important person in the entire event was not there. Washington Roebling remained in his apartment, watching the spectacle from his window,
a private, silent participant in his family's great victory. However, as the official procession reached the Brooklyn side, a momentous symbolic gesture took place. Emily Warren Roebling was the first person to ride across the bridge in a carriage. As she passed, holding a rooster, a symbol of victory, the crowd erupted. It was a silent, official acknowledgement that she, the unsung heroine, was the true executor of the project. Later that evening, the celebration culminated in a massive fireworks display over the East River, illuminating the granite towers and the steel cables that had once been dismissed as a deadly fantasy. The impossible dream was real. New York and Brooklyn were joined.
The engineering feats that defined the bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge remains, to this day, one of the most astonishing pieces of civil engineering in history, holding several remarkable facts that astonished U.S. audiences then and now. The power of redundancy. John Roebling over-engineered the bridge to an insane degree. He specified that the completed structure should be 6 times stronger than necessary. This phenomenal factor of safety is why, over 140 years later, the bridge still stands, bearing the weight of modern traffic it was never designed for. The unintentional time capsule. The Brooklyn caisson, which still rests on the river bottom, was constructed with a 7-foot layer of concrete over the timber base. Within this concrete, workers left behind tools, coins, and other artifacts. The caisson itself is the world's largest underwater wooden box, entombed forever beneath the Manhattan Tower. A grand architecture of light. The walkway, the promenade, was Roebling's unique architectural insight. Most bridge designs only allowed for traffic, but Roebling insisted on a central, elevated pedestrian path. He foresaw the psychological need for people to experience the bridge on foot, to pause and admire the urban landscape. This elevated walkway is the architectural feature that makes the Brooklyn Bridge a beloved public space, not just a highway. The Great Panic of 1883. Even after its grand opening, the bridge had to overcome a final, terrifying obstacle: public trust. People, still deeply suspicious of the towering height and the relatively new steel construction, were afraid to use the structure. 6 days after the opening, on May 30th, 1883, Memorial Day, a terrifying incident occurred. A woman tripped on the promenade, and a rumor instantly spread through the crowded walkway that the bridge was collapsing. The resulting stampede was brutal. 12 people were crushed to death, and dozens more were injured. The tragedy reinforced public fear. To restore faith, the city of New York staged a public demonstration a week later that has since become legend. P.T. Barnum, the great showman, marched a herd of 21 elephants across the bridge, a massive, reassuring display of brute weight, proving once and for all that the bridge was safe, strong, and enduring. The spectacle was a massive publicity coup, cementing the bridge's place in the American imagination. The final legacy. The Brooklyn Bridge is not merely a piece of infrastructure, it is a monument to the human cost of innovation and the power of family dedication. Washington Roebling remained an invalid for the rest of his life, living until 1926, long enough to see his bridge become an icon. He continued his engineering work from his home, assisting with other projects. Emily Roebling, now a celebrated figure, went on to travel the world, receive an honorary law degree from New York University, and advocate for women's rights. She died in 1903, having ensured her husband's life work was fully realized. The story of the Brooklyn Bridge, from John Roebling's initial vision through Washington's crippling sacrifice in the terrifying caissons to Emily's quiet, masterful command, is a profound tale of American architectural ambition, resilience, and the astonishing ability of ordinary individuals to execute an extraordinary feat.
It stands today as a timeless testament to the principle that genius, when met with unwavering dedication, can literally move mountains and conquer rivers.